Margaret Foster had always believed in second chances. At 62, with silver hair that caught the sunlight and eyes that still sparkled with hope, she'd spent 37 years as a devoted wife to Robert, a successful architect. Their life in suburban Connecticut seemed picture perfect from the outside. But lately, something had shifted. Robert had become distant. Late nights at the office, hushed phone calls, a new cologne she didn't recognize. Margaret tried to ignore the warning signs, convincing herself it was just stress from his latest project. Then came the intervention. One autumn afternoon, their daughter Claire and son David sat Margaret down in her own living room. Their faces were serious, concerned. Claire held her mother's hand gently. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad," Claire began, her voice trembling. Margaret's heart began to race, but she kept her composure, years of grace under pressure serving her well. David took a deep breath. "We've seen him with someone else, a woman from his firm named Vanessa." "Mom, we're so sorry." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Margaret felt the floor shift beneath her, but she remained seated, dignified even in her shock. "How long?" she whispered. "We think about 6 months," Claire said, tears streaming down her face. "We didn't know how to tell you." The children insisted Margaret needed protection. They'd heard Robert and Vanessa making plans, discussing finances. Claire, lawyer herself, was blunt. "Mom, they're talking about him leaving you. You need to protect yourself." Within days, Margaret's children had arranged everything. "You're going to a safe place," they assured her. "A facility where you can think clearly and plan your next steps." Margaret packed her bags, her hands moving mechanically through drawers and closets. Clothes, toiletries, photographs of happier times that now felt like lies. But Margaret Foster hadn't survived 62 years by being naive. She'd always been the organized one, the planner. Years ago, on her father's advice, she'd kept her own accounts, her own savings from a small inheritance and careful investments. Money Robert didn't know about. Money she'd kept separate, just in case. As she packed, a different plan formed in her mind. Her children thought they were sending her to a counseling retreat. Robert, when informed, seemed almost relieved. But Margaret had other ideas. She withdrew funds from her private account. She booked something she dreamed about for years, but Robert had always dismissed as frivolous: a month-long Mediterranean cruise. First class. Departing in 3 days, Margaret left a simple note for Robert on the kitchen counter: "Gone to find myself. Don't wait up." The cruise ship was magnificent. The Aurora Dreamer, a luxury liner that would wind through the Greek islands, along the Italian coast, through the French Riviera. Margaret stood on the deck as they departed from New York Harbor, watching the skyline fade into mist. For the first time in months, she breathed freely. She met James on the 3rd night. In the ship's quiet library, he was distinguished, maybe 65, with kind eyes and reading glasses perched on his nose. He was reading Steinbeck. She was attempting a mystery novel but couldn't focus. "The plot not holding your attention?" he asked with a gentle smile. Margaret laughed, surprising herself. "My own life has become mystery enough." They talked for hours that night. James was a retired teacher from Boston, widowed 5 years. He spoke of his late wife with such tenderness that Margaret found herself crying, not from sadness, but from recognizing what real love looked like. "My marriage was a performance," she confessed. "I just didn't know I was the only one acting." James reached across and squeezed her hand. "Then maybe it's time for a new show. One where you're the star, not the supporting character." The days flowed like wine. Margaret and James explored ancient ruins in Athens. They shared gelato in Rome, laughing as it melted faster than they could eat it. In Barcelona, they danced clumsily to street musicians, neither of them skilled, but both of them happy. Margaret learned that James had sold his house after his wife passed, living simply on his pension and traveling when he could. He taught her about art and architecture, really taught her, not like Robert's dismissive explanations. "You see this painting?" James said in a small Florentine gallery. "The way the light falls? That's how you look when you smile. Like someone just remembered to turn on the sun." Margaret blushed like a schoolgirl, but she hadn't forgotten. Back home, Claire was following Margaret's instructions. As her mother's attorney, she'd filed separation papers. She'd documented Robert's affair with private investigator reports. She'd frozen joint accounts and secured Margaret's rights to the house they'd built together. Robert's calls and messages grew increasingly frantic. Margaret blocked his number after the first week. Vanessa, it turned out, was 28 and already losing interest when confronted with the reality of Robert's pending divorce costs. On the cruise's 20th day, under stars that seemed close enough to touch, James took Margaret's hand on the upper deck. "I know this is fast," he said carefully. "I know you're healing. But Margaret, these weeks with you have reminded me what joy feels like. When we dock, I don't want to say goodbye." Margaret looked at this kind man, so different from Robert with his ambition and superficiality. "I'm going back to fight for what's mine," she said firmly. "My home, my dignity, my future." "I know," James said, "and I'll be there, however you need me. Friend, companion, or maybe, someday, something more." They kissed under the Mediterranean stars. Gentle and unhurried. Two people who'd learned that life's best moments often come after you think the story's over. When Margaret returned to Connecticut 6 weeks after leaving, she was transformed. Sun-kissed skin, confident stride, a lightness in her step that 37 years of marriage had never given her. The legal proceedings were fierce but fair. Robert tried to claim he'd been planning to reconcile, but Claire's evidence was overwhelming. Margaret got the house, a generous settlement, and her freedom. Robert married Vanessa 8 months later. They divorced within 2 years. Margaret didn't gloat. She was too busy living. James moved to Connecticut, buying a charming cottage 3 miles from Margaret's home. They saw each other daily, but maintained independence. Two adults who'd learned that love works best when it's chosen freely, not bound by obligation. On the first anniversary of the cruise, James took Margaret back to the same library where they'd met on the ship, now docked for renovations and open for tours. "I fell in love with you right here," he said, pointing to the exact chairs. "When you laughed and said your life had become mystery enough. And now?" Margaret asked. "Now your life is an adventure," James said, "and I'm grateful to be part of it." Margaret Foster had believed in second chances. She'd discovered something better. She'd learned that sometimes life gives you a completely new beginning, gift wrapped in heartbreak and tied with a bow of courage. She'd packed her bags for a facility meant to keep her safe from her failing marriage. Instead, she'd sailed toward freedom, toward love, toward herself. And that had made all the difference.